Hello, we've come to the conclusion of our discussion this semester. This is the last lecture of our course. I'm talking to you from Afghanistan, as I have been for most of this semester, and Afghanistan is as good a place as any to start sort of thinking about the future and is there a future for a place like Afghanistan in a globalized world, or is Afghanistan going to be consigned to a kind of neo-feudalism where the, the both the politics and the economics will not be in the best interests of the majority of people who live here. So what have we learned in this semester? I hope we've got a good appreciation that politics and economics only exist separately in academia, that it's it's not very realistic to separate them or to even study them independent of one another in terms of how the world really works. We know that every conflict, even though the people fighting in it express different ideas, every conflict has an economic component to it, even if it's hidden by rhetoric or ideology that that sort of diverts attention elsewhere. We also know that despite over $1 trillion spent on foreign aid in recent decades, that poverty is really still rampant in many places in the world. India, for example, a large functioning democracy with many wealthy people, still has more people living in dire poverty than all of Africa. I mean, it's a fact about India that people don't know. We also know that no one seems to have the answers on how to fight all this, but there are certainly plenty of good ideas on how to overcome these problems. We as we go from why nations fail to the discussion of the political economy of West Africa, to finally President Ashraf Ghani's book on fixing failed states, we see each one of these books sort of lays out a set of issues and then comes up with a set of solutions or proposals to deal with it. And each one of these is interesting. Each is worthwhile considering. However, according to President Ghani, in this book, where he really looks at the system of international assistance and how different ideas and different methods get spread around the world, he sees that the aid system evidently suffers from an inherent resistance to transparency and accountability, and it often cannot provide coherent advice and solutions to national governments. That's a very damning statement, particularly from someone who was working at the World Bank, which is the sort of the propagator of a lot of these programs, but also someone who's now running a country and who has to deal with all the international donors in this international system. So even though there are plenty of good ideas, the implementation of these ideas seems to have many problems, and we certainly can't give up. It would definitely be a moral crime if we stop trying to solve these problems. So, what can we do? Well, according to President Ghani, who is really a thoughtful man and as I said, now the president of one of the more complicated countries in the world. His view is that security will come through the creation of functioning states. Uh, as I'm sitting in Kabul right now, there are military helicopters flying over the compound here, almost not every half hour. This is a country that's still at war, uh, and it's still a country where the government has yet to find the way of projecting its power and influence outside of the capital. So, the security issue is critical. Very little will happen without it. And Ghani says you've got to create a functioning state, but it's really chicken and egg, which really needs to come first. He also says, we have to turn the poor and excluded people into stakeholders in the global system, or we'll leave them to their own devices, or worse, as he says, we declare a clash of civilizations, which would only become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we certainly see this in the case of the Middle East right now, and the rise of groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, where they are trying to propagate a clash of civilizations, and at the moment they're not weakening; they seem to be strengthening. So the solution of dealing with it is really out of our reach at the moment. He also says that state functionality is based upon the smooth interface between the polity, the economy, and the citizens, an arrangement that he calls a compact for effective governance. In other words, it's not only to be left up to the government, it's not only to be left up to the people running the economy. These things have to work together. In addition, civil society, those organizations which represent the will of the people, have to be brought into the dialogue, as well as international actors, so that this conversation gets expanded continuously, and that effective governance results from it. And then finally says the reputation of a state depends on its adherence to its legal obligations, from public borrowing to protection of property to human rights conventions. We see time and time again, particularly in our discussions about West Africa, that the state is a predatory state. It's a state which operates outside the bounds of legality, outside the bounds often of just common human decency, in terms of fulfilling its obligations to the most vulnerable people in the areas where they're operating. So building a state reputation requires this kind of real dialogue, this real openness for cooperation, this real desire on the part of leaders, whether they be political leaders, economic leaders, or social leaders, to work together to come up with a set of creative solutions for these problems. So finally, what have we really learned in the new century? Well, we've certainly learned that the United States is not going to lead the world forward on a crusade for good governance and global prosperity. This has to come from the countries and the people themselves, cooperating on the local, regional, and international levels. Here in the United States, we have many good things. I shouldn't say here, I'm in Afghanistan, but in the United States, the country where I was born and which I'm a proud citizen of, I know that we have limitations. I've seen what happens when we try to fix things, and it's always much more complicated than we think it's going to be. We also know that globalization has brought on many wonders for many people in the world, but we really haven't calculated the consequences if the entire population of the world was consuming and producing waste, for example, at the same level of your average American. It would be somewhat catastrophic given the systems we have to deal with it right now. Also, interestingly, no one except fiction writers seem to be positing a totally different type of future than the path that we seem to be on. We seem to be on this express train and we don't really know where it's going, but we know it's getting bigger, better, faster all the time. But is that really what we want? Is it really what we need as a civilization, as a species? But I guess we'll find out. And then finally, this whole notion of foreign assistance, of countries helping other countries. This has certainly done a great deal of good, but most places in dire poverty have not made much progress over the decades. So we really need to be thinking about all of these issues in a different way, in a more creative way. We know that the solution is not war. I believe that it lies somewhere in a combination of education, creative leadership, and an iron will to make things right. If we look at the successive Asian nations that arose from the most extreme poverty, the most extreme types of poverty, we see that there were huge sacrifices that were made. Entire generations denied themselves for future ones, and these countries. These cultures had a rock-solid commitment to educating their children to the highest level, and we see now that that it's paying premiums for them, or at least for many of them. As Americans, we're not used to this type of sacrifice. We've had it pretty good and pretty easy for a long time. Certainly, native-born ones. Americans who were born into the middle class, have had the best set of circumstances really that anyone in the history of the world have had. And not all Americans, I grant you that, and I really understand that, but for the majority that's the case. So this should all make us humble in our belief that we can easily change things, that we can easily bring about all these solutions. But we really need to be resolved to keep trying. So thank you for the semester, and please stay in touch if you would like to.